At my sister's wedding, I was humiliated in front of 200 guests, until the groom stood up and said one sentence that left the entire ballroom silent. My name is Ashley, and for 28 years, I've been living in the shadow of my perfect sister, Sarah. But that day, everything changed in a way I never could have imagined. Growing up, I always knew I was the other daughter. Sarah was everything our mother dreamed of. Blonde, blue-eyed, with that effortless charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. She was homecoming queen, valedictorian, and dated the quarterback. I was the quiet one with mousy brown hair who spent Friday nights reading in my room while Sarah was out conquering the world. Our childhood birthdays painted the perfect picture of our family dynamics. Sarah's Sweet 16 was a lavish affair with a DJ, professional photographer, and a cake that cost more than most people's monthly rent. When my 16th came around, Mum handed me a cupcake from the grocery store and said, "Happy birthday, honey. Sorry, we're still paying off Sarah's party." I learned early that in our family there were two categories, Sarah and everyone else trying to measure up to Sarah. When I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA and a full scholarship to study engineering, Mum's response was lukewarm at best. "Well, at least we don't have to worry about you not going to college," she said, already distracted by Sarah's latest modelling gig offer. Meanwhile, Sarah's graduation, despite her 3.2 GPA, was celebrated with a week-long family vacation to Hawaii. College became my escape. For 4 years, I was just Ashley, not Sarah's little sister or the other daughter. I excelled in my engineering program, made genuine friends, and discovered I actually had value beyond being someone's shadow. But every holiday visit home reminded me that nothing had changed. Family dinners were dominated by Sarah's adventures, her internship at a fashion magazine, her dates with wealthy men, her plans to marry into high society. "Sarah has such good instincts about men," Mum would gush over Christmas dinner. "She never settles for less than the best." The unspoken message was clear, unlike me. After graduation, I landed a job at a respected engineering firm. I was proud of my accomplishments. I was making good money, had my own apartment, and was contributing something meaningful to society. But when I brought my boyfriend David home to meet the family, the reception was ice cold. "He's nice," Mum said after he left, her tone suggesting nice was a disease. "But he's just a teacher, Ashley. Look at Sarah. She's dating that lawyer now. You should aim higher." David was kind, intelligent, and treated me like I mattered. But in my mother's eyes, he wasn't wealthy enough to elevate our family's status. The relationship ended 6 months later, not because we didn't care about each other, but because I started believing maybe I should aim higher too. The pattern continued through my 20s. Every achievement I earned was met with polite acknowledgement before the conversation inevitably shifted to Sarah's latest conquest. When I got promoted to senior engineer, the family dinner conversation lasted exactly 30 seconds on my news before pivoting to Sarah's engagement announcement. That's right, Sarah was engaged. To Marcus Wellington, CEO of a tech startup that had just gone public. He was handsome, wealthy, and according to Sarah, absolutely obsessed with her. The engagement party was a scene from a magazine, held at the country club, with Sarah floating around in a designer dress that cost more than my car. "Isn't she just radiant?" Mum whispered to every guest who would listen. I always knew Sarah would marry well. She has such good taste in men. I stood in the corner, wearing my best dress, which suddenly felt cheap and inadequate, watching my sister receive the kind of attention I'd craved my entire life. But what hurt most wasn't the attention itself. It was the clear message that my worth was measured entirely by my ability to snag a wealthy husband. The wedding planning process was torture. Sarah made it clear from the beginning that I wouldn't be in the wedding party. "It's nothing personal, Ash," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But I want the bridal party to have a certain aesthetic. You understand?" I understood perfectly. I didn't fit the image she wanted to project. Instead, I was relegated to distant relative status. While Sarah's college sorority sisters were fitted for matching bridesmaid dresses and planning elaborate bachelorette trips, I was assigned to address invitations, alone at my apartment like hired help. "Just make sure your handwriting is neat," Sarah instructed. "These are going to very important people." The guest seating chart was another humiliation. I was placed at table 12, the very back of the ballroom, sandwiched between Great-Aunt Martha, who couldn't hear, and some distant cousins I'd met once at a funeral. Sarah's sorority sisters sat at table 2, right next to the head table. The message was unmistakable. I was family by blood, but not by choice. 3 weeks before the wedding, Mum pulled me aside for what she called a little chat. "Ashley? Honey?" she began, her voice taking on that patronising tone I'd learned to dread. "I need you to understand how important this day is for Sarah. This is her moment to shine, and frankly, it reflects on our entire family." "I understand, Mum. I need you to really understand," she interrupted. "Marcus comes from a very prominent family. His parents will be there, along with some very influential people. I need you to blend in, wear something appropriate, keep your conversation light, and please don't mention your job unless someone specifically asks." "What's wrong with my job?" Mom sighed. "Nothing's wrong with it, sweetheart. It's just not very glamorous. People might not understand why a young woman would choose such a masculine field. We don't want them getting the wrong impression about our family. The wrong impression. As if my career in engineering, something I was genuinely good at and passionate about, was somehow shameful. And Ashley," Mom continued, "try to do something with your hair. Maybe get it professionally done. Sarah's hairdresser might have time for a quick touch-up." Sarah's hairdresser didn't have time. Or rather, Sarah didn't want to share her wedding day glam team with her embarrassing little sister. So I did my own hair and makeup the morning of the wedding, standing in my small apartment bathroom, trying to make myself look worthy of sitting in the back row of my sister's perfect day. The dress I chose was navy blue, conservative, appropriate, and completely forgettable. Exactly what my family expected from me. As I drove to the venue, my best friend Emma called. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "You know they're going to treat you like garbage." "She's still my sister," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction. "Yeah, well, sometimes family is the worst at seeing your worth. Just remember, you saved a man's life 3 years ago. You literally stopped traffic to help a stranger. That means more than any fancy wedding or rich husband." She was referring to an incident I rarely thought about anymore. I'd been driving home from work when I witnessed a motorcycle accident. The rider, an older man, was unconscious and bleeding. While other cars drove around the scene, I stopped, called 911, and stayed with him until paramedics arrived. I even visited him in the hospital a few times, bringing books and making sure he wasn't alone. His family lived across the country, and I couldn't stand the thought of him recovering by himself. It was just the right thing to do, nothing heroic about it. "Thanks, Em," I said, "I'll be fine." But as I pulled into the country club parking lot and saw the sea of luxury cars, I wasn't sure I would be fine. I was walking into a room full of people who measured worth by bank account balances and social connections. In their world, I was nobody special. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I had to admit. Sarah looked stunning in her designer gown, and Marcus seemed genuinely happy. For a moment, watching them exchange vows, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this would be a turning point. Maybe seeing Sarah so happy would soften my family's edges. But then came the reception. I found my assigned seat at table 12, making polite conversation with relatives I barely knew while watching the head table laugh and toast with champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Sarah glowed in the spotlight, exactly where she belonged. The speeches began after dinner. Marcus's best man told funny stories about their college days. Sarah's maid of honour shared touching memories of their friendship. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood gracefully, champagne flute in hand, her smile radiant under the ballroom lights. The room fell silent, all eyes on the beautiful bride. "Thank you all for being here on the most important day of my life," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "I'm so grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most to me." Her eyes swept the room, pausing on the head table, the front row tables, completely skipping over table 12 where I sat. "You know," Sarah continued, her smile taking on a sharper edge, "people always say there are two types of women in this world. Some are born to marry well, to elevate themselves and their families. Others—" She paused, letting out a small laugh that made my stomach drop. "Others are born to raise mistakes." A few people chuckled uncomfortably. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Fortunately for Marcus," Sarah raised her glass toward her new husband, "he chose wisely. He chose the type of woman who knows her worth." The applause was scattered and awkward. I could feel eyes turning toward me, recognizing the thinly veiled insult. My hands trembled as I reached for my water glass. But Sarah wasn't done. "Of course we can't all be so lucky," she said, her gaze finally landing on me across the crowded ballroom. "Some of us have to settle for, well, let's just say not everyone in this room made the same smart choices I did." The room was dead silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. Then Mom stood up from her seat at the head table. My heart sank further. Surely she would say something to redirect this cruel moment, to protect her other daughter from public humiliation. Instead, she picked up her own microphone. "Well," Mom said, with a laugh that cut through me like a blade, "at least her mistake wore shoes tonight." The laughter that followed wasn't the polite chuckling from before. It was loud, cruel, and directed entirely at me. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never be seen again. My face burned with shame as 200 people laughed at the family joke I'd apparently become. I started to stand, ready to flee to the bathroom or my car or anywhere that wasn't here, when something unexpected happened. Marcus stood up. The laughter died instantly. Marcus stood slowly, his face grave, his eyes moving between Sarah and my mother with an expression I couldn't quite read. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear champagne bubbles popping in glasses across the ballroom. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly without the microphone, "but I can't remain silent after hearing what was just said." Sarah's smile faltered. "Marcus, honey, I was just—" "You were just what, Sarah?" His voice was calm, but firm. Making jokes at your sister's expense in front of 200 people? My mother's face went pale. Marcus, dear, it was just family teasing. We didn't mean... Mrs. Henderson, Marcus interrupted, and I'd never heard my mother's name spoken with such quiet authority. With all due respect, that wasn't teasing, that was cruelty. The entire ballroom held its breath. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what was happening. Was my sister's new husband really defending me? Marcus turned to face me across the crowded room. Ashley, he said, and something in his voice made my heart skip. Do you remember 3 years ago you helped a man who'd been in a motorcycle accident on Highway 42? The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course I remembered. It was the accident Emma had mentioned earlier, but how could Marcus possibly know about that? Yes, I managed to whisper, though I'm not sure anyone heard me. You stopped your car when everyone else just drove by, Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving mine. You called 911, you stayed with him until the paramedics arrived. You even went to the hospital with him because he was alone. My mouth went dry. How do you... That man was my father. The words echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. I heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, saw my mother's hand fly to her throat. The guests began murmuring, a low buzz of confusion and curiosity. Your father? I whispered. Marcus nodded, his expression softening. Robert Wellington. He was on his way home from a business meeting when a delivery truck ran a red light. The doctors said if you hadn't stopped when you did, if you hadn't applied pressure to his wounds and kept him conscious, he would have died before the ambulance arrived. I remembered now the older man, distinguished even while bleeding, on the asphalt. He'd kept apologising for the trouble, worried about his bike, asking me to call his wife. I'd ridden with him in the ambulance because he seemed so scared, and I couldn't bear the thought of him being alone. You visited him for 2 weeks, Marcus continued, brought him books, sat with him during physical therapy. You never asked for anything, never mentioned it to anyone. When he tried to thank you, to give you a reward, you disappeared. I didn't need a reward, I said, my voice barely audible. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Ashley, anyone wouldn't have. Most people drove right past my father that day, but you stopped. You cared about a complete stranger. Sarah was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something between shock and... was that respect? Dad spent the next 3 years trying to find you, Marcus said. He hired a private investigator, posted ads in newspapers, even went back to that intersection every month, hoping to see you again. He called you his guardian angel. Tears were streaming down my face now. Is he okay? He's perfect, thanks to you. Marcus's voice broke slightly. When Sarah first mentioned she had a sister named Ashley who worked as an engineer, I wondered if it could be the same person. But when she showed me your picture, he shook his head. I couldn't believe it. The woman who saved my father's life was going to be my sister-in-law. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. I could see guests looking back and forth between us, trying to process this revelation. I was so excited to finally meet you, to thank you properly, Marcus continued. But then I started noticing how Sarah talked about you, how your mother talked about you, and I began to understand why you never wanted recognition for what you did. He turned back to Sarah, and his expression hardened again. You called your sister a mistake, Sarah. You mocked her in front of everyone we know, but the woman you're calling a mistake? She's the reason I still have a father. Sarah's face had gone white. Marcus, I didn't know it. You didn't know because you never bothered to learn anything real about your sister, Marcus said. You were too busy looking down on her to see that she's exactly the kind of person, kind, selfless, genuine, that you pretend to be. The murmurs in the crowd were growing louder. I could hear fragments of conversation. She saved his father? 3 years ago? The bride didn't even know? My mother stood up shakily. Marcus, please, this is Sarah's wedding day. Surely we can discuss this later. No, Mrs. Henderson, we can't. Marcus's voice was steel now, because what happened here tonight showed me exactly who I was about to marry. Marcus, please, Sarah's voice cracked. I love you. We can work through this. I'll apologize to Ashley. You'll apologize? Marcus turned to her, and I saw something die in his eyes. Sarah, you publicly humiliated your sister at our wedding. You called her a mistake in front of 200 people. Your own mother joined in. And you think an apology fixes that? He pulled off his wedding ring and set it on the head table. The small sound of metal hitting wood seemed to echo through the massive ballroom. I can't do this, he said simply. I can't marry someone who treats her own family with such cruelty. What happens when we have children? What happens when they disappoint you? Will they become mistakes too? Sarah was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. Marcus, no, please don't do this. Everyone's watching. You're embarrassing me. I'm embarrassing you. Marcus's voice rose slightly. Sarah, you just spent 5 minutes embarrassing your sister in front of everyone we know, and now you're worried about your own embarrassment? He looked around the silent ballroom at the faces staring back at him. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. This wedding is over. The bar will remain open and dinner has been paid for, so please enjoy the evening. But there will be no marriage today. The chaos that erupted was immediate and overwhelming. Guests began talking all at once, some standing to get a better view, others reaching for their phones to capture the moment. Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. My mother rushed to her side, shooting daggers at me as if this was somehow my fault. Through it all, Marcus walked directly toward my table. The crowd parted for him like he was royalty, which I supposed in a way he was. When he reached me, he extended his hand. Ashley, he said gently, would you walk with me? I took his hand and stood on shaking legs. He led me through the stunned crowd, past my weeping sister and furious mother, toward the ballroom's French doors that opened onto the country club's gardens. The evening air was cool and quiet after the chaos inside. We walked in silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the disrupted reception fading behind us. I'm sorry, I finally said. I'm so sorry this happened. Your wedding day is ruined because of me. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me. Ashley, nothing about this is your fault. Nothing. But if I hadn't come, if I had just stayed home, then I would have married someone who thinks it's acceptable to publicly humiliate her own family, Marcus said firmly. You did me a favour tonight. You showed me who Sarah really is. I wiped my eyes, trying to process everything that had happened. I can't believe you remembered me. It's been 3 years. My father never forgot you, neither did I. Marcus smiled sadly. He talks about you all the time. How gentle you were, how you held his hand in the ambulance and told him everything would be okay. How you visited every day until he was released, and then you just vanished. I didn't want anything from him, I said. I was just glad he was okay. That's exactly what made it so extraordinary. In a world where everyone wants something, you wanted nothing except to help a stranger. Marcus shook his head. And tonight, your own family called you a mistake. We sat on a bench overlooking the golf course. The reception noise had died down. I assumed people were either leaving or gathering around Sarah for damage control. What happens now? I asked. Now I go home and tell my father that I finally found his guardian angel, Marcus said, and that she's exactly as wonderful as he remembered. I meant about Sarah, about the wedding. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The wedding is over, Ashley. What Sarah did tonight, I can't come back from that. I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. She does love you, I said, surprising myself by defending my sister. She's not a bad person. She's been treated like a princess her whole life. She doesn't know how to see other people clearly. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But love isn't just about feelings. It's about respect, kindness, how you treat the people who can't do anything for you. Tonight showed me that Sarah doesn't understand that. A figure appeared in the doorway of the ballroom, my mother looking around frantically. When she spotted us, she marched over with determined steps. Ashley, she called out, her voice shrill. What have you done? Do you have any idea what you've caused? I stood up, Marcus beside me. Mom, I didn't do anything. You ruined your sister's wedding, the most important day of her life, and you destroyed it. I destroyed it. The words came out louder than I intended. Mom, I was sitting quietly at the back table when Sarah decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. I didn't ask Marcus to stand up for me. I didn't ask for any of this. If I hadn't come, you would have married a man who didn't know the woman he was marrying, Marcus interrupted. Mrs. Henderson, with respect, your daughter Ashley saved my father's life. She's a hero, and tonight you helped your other daughter mock her for sport. My mother's face flushed red. You don't understand our family dynamics, Marcus. Ashley has always been difficult. She's never fit in, never made the effort. The effort to what? I asked, and for the first time in my life I heard anger in my own voice. The effort to be Sarah? The effort to pretend I'm someone I'm not, so you can be proud of me. Ashley, no, Mum, I'm done. The words surprised me, but once they started, I couldn't stop them. I'm done trying to earn love from people who see me as an embarrassment. I'm done apologizing for being myself. Sarah appeared behind our mother, still in her wedding dress, but looking destroyed. Her makeup was smeared, her hair dishevelled, and her eyes were red from crying. Ashley, she said, her voice small and broken. Please, can't you fix this? Can't you talk to Marcus? Tell him I didn't mean it. Tell him I was just nervous. Fix this? I stared at my sister in disbelief. Sarah, you called me a mistake in front of 200 people. You said I wasn't worthy of being in your wedding because I didn't fit your aesthetic. You've spent our entire lives making me feel like I don't belong in this family. I was just joking. No, you weren't. You were being honest. For the first time in years, you said exactly what you think of me. Sarah's tears started fresh. But now Marcus won't marry me. Everything is ruined. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. Sarah, if Marcus won't marry you because of how you treated me, then maybe you should think about why that is. This is ridiculous, my mother interjected. Marcus, you're throwing away a wonderful woman over a silly speech. Sarah was just being playful. Playful? Marcus's voice was ice cold. Mrs. Henderson, I watched my father nearly die 3 years ago. I know what real suffering looks like. What your daughters did tonight wasn't playful, it was cruel. And I won't spend my life wondering when that cruelty might be directed at me or my children. He turned to Sarah. I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. But this isn't about one speech. It's about who you are when you think nobody important is watching. Tonight, I learned that when you don't think someone matters, you have no problem destroying them for entertainment. Sarah crumpled further, and despite everything, my heart ached for her. She'd been raised to believe her worth came from her ability to attract and keep a wealthy man, and now that was crumbling around her. But I couldn't save her from the consequences of her choices, not anymore. I should go, I said quietly. Marcus nodded. Let me walk you to your car. As we left Sarah and my mother standing in the garden, I heard my sister call after us one more time. Ashley, please, I'm your sister. I stopped and turned back. Yes, Sarah, I am your sister. I always have been. That's what makes tonight so much worse. Walking through the country club parking lot with Marcus felt surreal. 3 hours ago, I'd been the family embarrassment, relegated to the back table. Now I was walking beside the man who just called off his wedding to defend me. Will you be okay? Marcus asked as we reached my car. I considered the question. My family was probably done with me after tonight. I'd likely be blamed for ruining Sarah's wedding for the rest of my life. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Yeah, I said and meant it. I think I will be. Marcus smiled. Dad's going to want to see you, you know. He's been carrying around a letter he wrote to thank you. He's been waiting 3 years to deliver it. I'd like that, I admitted. I'd like to see him again. As I drove away from the country club, I caught a glimpse of Sarah in my rearview mirror, still standing in her wedding dress in the parking lot, looking lost and alone. Part of me wanted to turn around, to try to comfort her, to fall back into my old role of accommodating everyone else's feelings. Instead, I kept driving toward my own life, finally ready to stop apologising for who I was.